Election after election, America votes in Democrats or Republicans. Clearly, each party has its different views and what they stand for. Democrats are known for their liberal views, while Republicans are known for their conservative views. If both parties are supposedly so different, why is it that no matter what the party, our country continues to suffer? Year after year, Americans witness the ever-growing government power, never-ending wars, increasing indebtedness, and more international entanglements. So who are these political parties and what are they doing to America?
For most of the 20th century, the term liberal could be given to anyone who wanted an array of government programs at home, more spending and more red ink, and the international entanglements in the foreign policy area. For many years, the term conservative could rightly be applied to those who wanted government power limited, fiscal responsibility, and national independence. Conservatives always stressed adherence to the U.S. Constitution, but not anymore.
Today, we not only have liberals and conservatives, but those who can be labeled as neoconservatives or neocons. Neocons are liberals who defected from the Democratic Party and set up shop in the Republican Party. These individuals may sound conservative, but do not support the conservative views with their votes. For example, neocon politicians talk about balancing the budget, but do nothing except create more deficits. Instead of cutting spending, they support things that are continually increasing federal spending, which in turn is crippling our economy. Neocons also support an internationalist foreign policy. This includes supporting the United Nations, being part of preemptive wars, as well as ratifying international treaties and joining many organizations that America should not be a part of. When looking at the Republican Party, many can separate the true conservative from a neocon by watching how they vote, particularly on topics like the Patriot Act, the Federal Reserve, welfare, immigration, foreign policy, and much more. Neoconservatives will be easier to recognize when you have a better understanding of who they are, what their motivation is, and some of the history behind this movement.
Irving Kristol, the man who happily accepted the title of Godfather of Neoconservatism, wrote Neo Conservatism, the autobiography of an idea. A New York City native, he stated in his book, "We accepted the New Deal in principle and had little affection for the kind of isolationism that then permeated American conservatism." Okay, let's analyze what this means.
During the Great Depression of the 1930s, Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal was sold as the answer to America's problems. The New Deal brought about the creation of an array of government departments, bureaus, and agencies. Many politicians at the time accepted the New Deal, but failed to realize the amount of government control that came with it. With the acceptance of a more liberal approach, it was recognized that both parties had the potential to change.
In 1966, Georgetown University professor Carroll Quigley authored a 1,300-page book entitled Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time. Quigley favored a larger national government and even wrote approvingly of a secret society whose goal was to rule the world. Toward the end of his massive book, Professor Quigley wrote that substantive differences between the Democrats and the Republicans, meaning between liberals and conservatives, should be overcome. He advocated that both parties should favor ever more government power and both should work toward the secret society's goal of a world government. Quigley claimed that it was a foolish idea to want Republicans and Democrats to offer different ideas and policies. Instead, he wrote, "The two parties should be almost identical so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extensive shifts in policy."
Irving Kristol and other like-minded politicians agreed with Quigley. So by 1972, neoconservatism began to flourish. During that year, many Democrats became discouraged with decisions within their party, as well as their choice for George McGovern for president. With seeing the direction their party was moving, they felt that their only option was to move to the Republican Party. Crystal explained what happened. In 1972, the nomination of George McGovern, an isolationist and a candidate of the New Left, signified that the Democratic Party was not hospitable to any degree of neoconservatism. Only a few of us drew the obvious conclusion that we would have to try and find a home in the Republican Party, which had always been an alien entity so far as we were concerned. But with every passing year, our numbers grew.
They didn't change what they stood for when they moved into the Republican Party. They began to change the Republican Party. It was the Republican leadership that altered its policies and in the process became more like liberal Democrats. They had adopted the neoconservative perspective.
Individuals with the neocon perspective have often been said to be supporters of Leon Trotsky. A good example of this was Irving Kristol. He stated, "I regard myself lucky to have been a young Trotskyite, and I have not one single bitter memory." Trotskyite? Who is Trotsky? And what effect has he had on neoconservatives?
Leon Trotsky was Vladimir Lenin's partner when the two seized control of Russia in 1917. It was these two criminals who fastened communism on that unhappy land and created a reign of terror that murdered millions of innocent people. Lenin died in 1924, and Trotsky then became the partner of Joseph Stalin. Terror and murder continued, even grew. But Trotsky and Stalin had some serious differences that led to Trotsky having to flee Russia in 1927. Though they disagreed on how to enslave mankind, neither Trotsky nor Stalin ever abandoned the goal of creating a communist-led world government.
In 1995, Foreign Affairs published a review by John B. Judas. He stated, "The other important influence on neoconservatives was the legacy of Trotskyism. In the framework of international communism, the Trotskyites were rabid internationalists rather than realists and nationalists." As you can see, Leon Trotsky and his support for socialism have influenced those within the neoconservative movement. These individuals have become very effective in gaining control of the government a little at a time. The effectiveness of this movement has been made possible because of some very important neoconservatives within the national media.
Wall Street Journal editor Robert Bartley sought out Irving Kristol to be one of the paper's regular columnists. Neoconservatism's godfather wrote in the Journal about a May 1991 conference he chaired. Kristol stated, "Most of those attending regarded themselves as conservatives first and Republicans second. By the end of the meeting, a significant reversal had occurred. They were no longer conservatives first, they were Republican neoconservatives. Out of that meeting, these once stalwart conservatives then concluded that President George H.W. Bush was the leader of the conservative wing of the GOP. But that wing wasn't truly conservative, it was neoconservative."
Ever since that meeting, the neoconservative perspective has been creeping into America and our form of government. Keep in mind, neocons within the government are in favor of joining forces with the United Nations, using preemptive wars, as well as enrolling in many international treaties and organizations. George H.W. Bush proved this in 1991 when he supported the United Nations in regards to the Iraq War, better known as Desert Storm. Many do not realize that the huge military effort led by the United States was not authorized by Congress, but rather by a United Nations Security Council resolution.
In the weeks leading up to the invasion, President Bush told the nation over and over again that the goal of invading Iraq included strengthening of the United Nations and building a new world order. He stated,
"Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order, can emerge."
And it has to do with a new world order. And that world order is only going to be enhanced if this newly activated peacekeeping function of the United Nations proves to be effective.
Many within Bush's administration supported the United Nations and a new world order. This is not conservatism, This is Neo Conservatism. A true conservative would not go to war because of a UN resolution. They would go to war because Congress declared it. When there is a declaration of war, it should be just. War should not be used as a weapon for personal gain. Most wars cannot be termed just. A majority of the wars in the past century can be labeled as preemptive. Preemptive war is a type of war that is oftentimes seen as an act of aggression, not defense. It is a type of war that is started without being attacked, or without certain expectations of being attacked. Neoconservatives have been known to use preemptive war in order to achieve their political ends, which, as George Bush has so plainly stated, is forming a new world order. Consider the invasion of Iraq in 1991. George H.W. Bush and others in his administration looked at Saddam's regime as hostile and viewed war with him as an opportunity to build a new world order. More progress towards this goal would have been accomplished if Saddam had been removed from power. Unfortunately for the neoconservatives, the UN resolution only authorized Saddam's military forces to be removed from Kuwait. Seen as a victory in America's eyes, Desert Storm was not a complete victory for President Bush and other neoconservatives. Soon after the first invasion, they were already planning a second invasion of Iraq to completely remove Saddam from power. However, they lost their opportunity to strike again when Bill Clinton won the election of 1992.
Prominent neoconservatives soon returned to power when the second President Bush took office in 2001. These men started planning for another invasion of Iraq immediately. What they needed was an excuse to proceed, and the 9/11 attacks supplied it.
Directly after the attacks of 9/11, Americans were grieving, as well as demanding justice. With the support of the American public, neoconservatives within the Bush administration were able to capitalize on this major national crisis.